Zealand to Australia. Recently, I've been uploading a lot of videos about nursing overseas, so for this live stream video, I want to talk more about the actual logistics of moving abroad. So for a bit of a background, I actually moved to New Zealand when I was 22 years old. I was by myself, and I guess my biggest challenge at that time was the financial aspects of things. So actually paying everything up front, paying my plane ticket, the visa application, medical exam, and your competency assessment program, and yeah, those things, and the accommodation as well. So it was very challenging financially. However, when I finally got a job in a rest home and things did improve, and I did meet a Filipino family, who took me in. I rented I rented a room in their house, and they were very good to me as well. They would often drop me off for work, or sometimes they'll even take me to church, things like that, and include me in their short travels. However, as you know, this year, I actually moved to Australia with my family, and moving abroad this time around, take two, is I feel a lot more difficult because of many factors. Now, I have written up some things here just to keep me focused on my topic for tonight. So I will from time to time refer to my notes just so I can be focused. So the first factor I think that made it more difficult this time around is obviously the pandemic, as with anyone else. And I've actually been fortunate to catch up with some of you, who was going to move to New Zealand and things like that. And I know you would understand the challenges that pandemic has brought to us. I'm trying to book your flight. The guidelines are fluid. At that time, because I got my contract for my job, I think end of February, and then I had to move to Australia end of March. So I was trying to figure out, sorting out our COVID-19 tests. We have to pay, I think my husband had to pay $200 each for the test, so it was quite expensive. And then you're not sure as well if your flight will be canceled or things like that. So yeah, it was very stressful time, if I have to be honest. And oh, by the way, if at any point you want to join in and I don't know, make some comments in the chat box section, please feel free to say hi. Let me know where you're watching this video. If you're in the Philippines, if you're already in New Zealand, or if you are in Singapore. So, hello. Okay, so let me just go back on my list. Yeah, an isolation requirement as well, because I think when we flew to Australia at that time, end of March, we still had to do a rat test, like after 24 hours of arriving, and you have to like stay in your designated hotel just before you can't leave the hotel or your accommodation until you get a negative rat test result, if that makes sense somehow. And yeah. And what else can I tell you about? Yeah, furniture, cars, selling all of the things that we had in New Zealand at a short period of time. Because like I said, I got my job offer end of February, and then I was supposed to start April 4. So between February 23 to March 24, I was trying to figure out, my husband and I were trying to figure out all of this logistics. So we ended up selling most of our things through using TradeMe and even Facebook Marketplace, or even word of mouth from my friends, my colleagues. And I guess it's the drawback of trying to meet the timeline. We didn't really have the luxury of dictating the price, so we ended up like selling our things like a lot more cheaper. And then we also wanted to transfer some of our things from New Zealand to Australia. So I think it's more of the bigger appliances that we just recently bought, like our washing machine. We also have like our mattresses that we wanted to take to from New Zealand to Australia. And for your reference, the moving company that we use, was based in New Zealand. They're called Trans World International Removals. And then at that time, they were the only company who replied to my email. I think because we were at the peak of the pandemic in New Zealand, and obviously everyone is short staffed everywhere you go. So I was very grateful for them for replying and accommodating my request, because I told them I needed all of my things. I needed it to be picked up end of March. So yeah, I think just to give you an idea, for the moving cost, they gave me different quotations. It actually depends on how much you're going to bring. Not really in terms of like heavy, how heavy your things are, but more on what you can fit in a certain square meter. So they've given me different quotations, and I think at the end of it, it was close to $2,500. Um, and then I also had to pay Australian quarantine inspection service fee, which is $270. And I also had to pay the insurance as well, which comes in a percentage depending on what type of cover you're going to get. And then closer to the date, or I think maybe first week of March, I finally got a reply from a different moving company, but their quotation was actually more expensive, so that's why I stuck to using Trans World International instead. Now, to be completely honest, it took a while before we got our things finally delivered here in Australia, and again, it's all to do because of the pandemic. Um, I think the time that they transferred our things from New Zealand to Sydney was quick enough within timeline, but it was really the transferring from Sydney to Brisbane that took, which felt like forever, because at that time the COVID numbers actually peaked in Sydney as well. So yeah, um, that bit was difficult as well. And then for us, because we have a property in New Zealand, we also had to deal with selling the house that we have, and then sorting out how we would, um, I guess, arrange our rental property, like how we would advertise for it, and then looking for a property manager, looking for a tenant, which, to be fair, I feel like I'm very grateful to have all of these concerns, because I think New Zealand has been very good to me and to my family, giving us all of these opportunities to have, in a property in New Zealand and have an investment property. So these were good problems, I guess, to have at that time, but they're problems nonetheless that kept me awake at night. So yeah, so if I summarize those four things, what made it more difficult would be the pandemic, selling our things in short period of time, and also transferring some of our things from New Zealand to Australia, and then managing how we would sort out our property. Yeah, one for rental and then the one that we had to sell at that time. And then let me just check my other notes here. Another thing, I guess, that made our transfer challenging from New Zealand to Australia would be our commitment at work and to our new work. So, like I said, um, because it was happening almost all at the same time, we were still rendering, our resignation notice. We were still working, and in my role, I was working at that time as an educator and as a project manager as well. It was close to the auditing of the hospitals and meeting criteria. And at the same time, I'm receiving like the requirements for my new job, your pre-employment checks. I was asked to do e-learnings. There's like 17 e-learnings that I had to do. And I couldn't put it off because I wasn't sure like how good the internet connection will be in whichever place we're going to stay in Australia, which was not definite yet at this time. And then speaking of pre-employment requirements, just to give you an idea, they actually ask for a copy of evidence of Australian working rights. So I'm a New Zealand citizen, so I've just given them a copy of my passport. And they also asked me to email them once I arrive in Australia because they would need to check a Vivo, oh, sorry. They would need to conduct a Vivo check on the day that I arrive in Australia to verify my 444 visa. And that's the special category visa for New Zealand citizens. They also ask me to give a proof of COVID-19 vaccination. So it's not just the international um, vaccination certificate that we receive from New Zealand. They actually want registration via Australian Immunization Register. And at that time, I didn't know how to do that at all. But now I know and I can share that information to you. So how I did this was actually going to a local pharmacy and I've just given them a copy of my COVID-19 vaccination certificate, even my cards as well, the one that we were given, in New Zealand. I've given that to them and then they've uploaded everything for me. And then one of the requirements that I struggled with as well was the police check because my employer offered me to do an application via Fit to Work police check, which cost about plus $36 plus GST, and I think I got a bit of a discount. However, when I tried to apply for my police check using Fit to Work, I really struggled with this one because they keep asking for documents that I don't have, like something relevant about living in Australia. And like, I don't live in Australia. I'm not sure how I can give you this document. So in the end, I ended up applying directly to Australian Federal Police, and I feel like that was a lot better. And I thought I should have done that in the first place because that would have made my life a lot easier. And then they just mailed my national police certificate to our New Zealand mailing address, and that's the one I forwarded to my Australian employer. And oh, by the way, if you are enjoying this video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. That would really help with my channel. And this is my first time doing this live stream video that I'm just really rattling all the information in my head. But let me know if this is something that you would be interested in to watch in the future. I'll try and be more organized the next time around. Oh, hello! Hello from New Plymouth, Taranaki. Hi, Liza! Okay, going back. Accommodation in Australia. So I was trying to look for accommodation while we were still in New Zealand. However, because we were transferring to Brisbane, right? I think we were transferring just when they had the flooding episode in Brisbane. So you would imagine that people who own their home were actually trying to rent a place for themselves. So definitely the rental market is a bit difficult here. It's very competitive. So we ended up actually staying in a hotel for about 2 weeks and we had to pay more because of that. I guess if you are moving from New Zealand to Australia, you're trying to look for short-term rental accommodation in the meantime, then an Airbnb would be good option as well. But for us, we wanted definitely to be in the city. We wanted to have to be in a place where it's comfortable for us as well, and especially we have a 3-year-old daughter. So yeah, so we ended up staying in a hotel for about 2 weeks before actually finding our long-term accommodation at this place. I would show you around, but it's a mess. That's just the reality of it. Yeah. And we actually had to pay more than what was advertised in the rental website, only because at that time, like I said, it was really the competition was really difficult to find a rental property. And then another thing that I had to sort out was daycare for my daughter. And I guess when you're really in a hurry, you don't really have much choice on that matter. Obviously, there's waiting lists in some daycare centers. I'm just very fortunate that in my workplace, there's a daycare, maybe just like 5 minutes walk from the hospital I'm working now, and they had a vacancy for a toddler. So yeah, that fit well. Yeah. And then things that we needed to sort out as well, buying a car in Australia. So I think in Queensland in particular, what I was told anyway, there's a shortage of small cars, I think, in Queensland area, so they're more expensive. In my experience, I feel like buying a car here in Australia is definitely more expensive than in New Zealand. I don't know why, but it is just more expensive. And we ended up applying for a car loan. So my husband and I bought from a different company. But the only requirements was one pay slip and then deposit. So I had to pay $700 for my car as a deposit. And then my husband paid $500 for his car for the deposit. I will write in the description box below the website that we used in order to search for cars as well. They would have different policies in there. But for me, again, personally, I feel like the cars are more expensive and the interest rate for me as well is a little bit more expensive than what I'm used to in New Zealand. The good thing though is um, at that time when we didn't have our own car, we had to pay for a car rental, which again is expensive. Everything is expensive when you're moving. But the good thing was the car loan company, which my husband bought his car from, they actually lent us a car rental first, or like they lent us a car to use while we were waiting for his paperwork to be approved, and that was free of charge. We just paid for the petrol. So yeah, that company was really good. I will write there the name of the company in the description box below because I just can't remember it from the top of my head. But yeah, so I guess be prepared, financially for all of these things. It would be really good if you're moving to a country where you already know someone, a friend or family member, because definitely they can help you out. But if you're like us, we don't know anyone. We don't have a family here. We have a friend though, from Tauranga, and now they're living in Brisbane as well. So that helped because at least they can support us. If we had any questions, they can answer our questions, and yeah. And another challenging part would be things that are still happening as we were already working. So I started working 4th of April. My husband worked the following week. So it was difficult because I was trying to do orientation for myself. My husband was doing his orientation, and then in the meantime, we have to look after our daughter. We had to find accommodation, car loan, figure things out, like converting our New Zealand driver's license to Australian driver's license. Um, we were undergoing training and competencies, and that was something that I was surprised as well because I'm currently working in a private hospital and it's a bigger company, and they're very strict in terms of making sure you meet their competencies before you actually do it, like even like giving oral medications, IV medications, blood transfusions, those things. Initially my husband worked in a smaller company, so I guess they're not so strict with the competencies, so it'll just depend on which company you're going to work for. But just, yeah, you just have to go through that orientation period, I guess. What else was I? We were trying to juggle a lot of things as well. So I have work, family, and obviously I try to do this little YouTube community world here for immigrant nurses or immigrants, in general, trying to move to New Zealand or Australia. And we are growing as a community. And I would like to take this opportunity to actually thank all of our moderators in our Facebook page, and we just started a Discord community as well. Um, we are mostly Filipinos in that Discord community, so the official language that they use there is Filipino. But yeah, it's just really sharing their information from nurses from Middle East, nurses from Singapore who are trying to go to New Zealand, and then eventually I'm hoping that there'll be a separate conversation for New Zealand nurses who are thinking of moving to Australia, and vice versa, Australian nurses thinking of moving to New Zealand. So I am just really sometimes some days I feel like really really tired because I am working full time, 40 hours a week, and I'm trying to accomplish these things that I have in my head, but with God's grace, nagagawa naman ng paraan. Naisisingit naman. And obviously, if you are an international viewer, if you're not a Filipino and you're still supporting this channel, thank you very much. It really means a lot for me. So anyway, yeah, so things are happening as we are already working. And then last on my note would be my Gov accounts. So here in Australia, they have most of their things are done electronically. So for me personally, as a New Zealand citizen, we can access childcare subsidy. And because childcare here is, again, expensive. I think that's the word that I've used a lot in this video. Everything is expensive. But yeah, so in order to access childcare subsidy, Medicare, that's the publicly funded healthcare here, in Australian taxation office, ATO, trying to sort all of those out. We have to do it electronically as well. And they have an 0800 number, but it's not like in New Zealand, because I feel like in New Zealand, if you call an 0800 number, at some point in time, someone will answer the phone. But here, I think obviously because there's more people here and because of COVID, and there's also understaffing obviously in their end, so it's just difficult to reach an actual person. And you have to link all of your account electronically as well. So for the childcare subsidy, it's really good because at the moment we only have to pay 50% of the actual fees. And in New Zealand, you can only access childcare subsidies if your kid is over 3 years old. But my daughter is technically still 2 years old, but we are able to access the subsidy, so that really helps. Medicare, I've already mentioned about, that's publicly care funded program. Taxations, we sorted that out in the end. So it's like IRD, your IRD number. Here they call it tax file number. And we've done that, I think, electronically as well. And then finding a GP for my daughter because of vaccinations. Oh, one thing, by the way, obviously, when you're moving overseas, bring your documents with you in the plane. My husband, hello husband, I know you're watching, packed my daughter's birth certificate along with the furniture that we asked Transworld like to collect. So it took a while before her birth certificate got here. Good thing I have, a copy. So that helps because you need that to enroll your child in like in the daycare center, and obviously a record of immunization for your children or kid. Yeah, so this episode is really just chatting, my big brain dump of everything that has happened. I will eventually make a comparison video, definitely, of life here in Australia versus life in New Zealand. However, I'm just thinking of doing it later in the year when I feel more objectively focused, I guess, with the discussion. And once I'm more settled, because obviously we don't really have much time to travel around, enjoy Brisbane. Because if you ask me now, which is more beautiful in terms of like a country to visit, I would say New Zealand by all means, because I haven't traveled a lot here in Australia, but it's definitely something that I'm thinking of doing. Um, and yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. As always, I wish you all the best with your journey, and I hope you will be blessed. I'll see you soon. Bye! Paano ba ito patayin?